The ship rocked hard against the current, and al-Hasan al-Wazzan knew, even before the strange sails appeared on the horizon, that something was wrong. Pirates owned this stretch of the Mediterranean. Everyone who sailed it knew the risk, but knowing a thing and living through it are two very different experiences. And within the hour, armed men were swarming his deck, and the diplomat, scholar, and world traveler who had crossed deserts and courted sultans was now a prisoner in chains, staring at the coastline of a continent that was not his own. He did not know it yet, but this single, violent afternoon in the year 1518 was about to turn him into someone else entirely. A man with two names, two faiths, and two lives, forever caught between them. To understand how he ended up on that ship, you have to go back more than 30 years to a city that no longer belonged to his people. Al-Hasan ibn Muhammad al-Wazzan was born sometime around the year 1488 in Granada, the last Muslim kingdom left standing in Spain. Some accounts push his birth a few years earlier, some a few years later. Even his own life resists a clean, tidy timeline. What we do know is that he was born into a world already ending. Granada, the final jewel of nearly 8 centuries of Muslim rule on the Iberian Peninsula, was living on borrowed time, and in 1492, when al-Hasan was still a small child, that time ran out. The city fell to the Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, and with it, the last Islamic kingdom in Western Europe collapsed. His family did what tens of thousands of Muslim and Jewish families did in that same brutal decade. They fled. They crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and resettled in Fez, Morocco, joining a wave of Andalusian refugees who carried with them the language, architecture, and scholarship of a civilization that Spain had just erased from its own soil. Fez became al-Hasan's real childhood. He studied at the Qarawiyyin, one of the oldest universities in the world, training in law, theology, and the kind of rigorous classical education that produced scholars, judges, and diplomats. And it was as a diplomat that his extraordinary life truly began. By his teenage years, al-Hasan was already traveling on behalf of the Wattasid Sultan of Fez, carrying messages, negotiating alliances, gathering intelligence. And he did not just travel. He went everywhere. He crossed the Sahara to Timbuktu and followed the Niger River through the heart of West Africa at a time when almost no European had any real knowledge of what lay south of the desert. He traveled to Cairo. He journeyed through the Hejaz to Mecca. He made his way north into the Ottoman Empire, walking the streets of Constantinople itself. By the time he was in his late 20s, al-Hasan al-Wazzan had likely seen more of the known world than almost any single person alive, Muslim or Christian. That knowledge, that impossibly rare first-hand experience of Africa and the Islamic world, was exactly what made him valuable, and exactly what made him a target. Sometime around 1518, while sailing home across the Mediterranean, most likely returning from a diplomatic mission, his ship was seized by Christian pirates. The exact details of the encounter are murky. Some accounts describe Sicilian raiders, others Spanish corsairs operating in the same waters. What is certain is what happened next. The pirates quickly realized they hadn't just captured a random traveler. They had captured a man who spoke multiple languages fluently, who understood the geography and politics of an entire continent that Europe barely comprehended, and who carried knowledge that no ransom of gold could match. So instead of selling him into ordinary slavery, they did something far more calculated. They gave him away as a gift to the most powerful man in Christian Europe. Picture that moment for a second. A Muslim scholar, born in the last Islamic kingdom of Spain, raised in Morocco, fluent in Arabic scholarship and Saharan geography, is delivered as a captive to the heart of Rome, a living trophy of Christian naval power over the Muslim Mediterranean. He spent roughly a year imprisoned in the Castel Sant'Angelo, the fortress just outside the Vatican walls. And somewhere during that year, something happened that historians still argue about today. Al-Hasan converted to Christianity. He was baptized personally by the Pope, who gave him a new name, Giovanni Leone, Johannes Leo. History would remember him as Leo Africanus. Was this a genuine spiritual transformation, or was it the calculated survival strategy of an intelligent man who understood exactly what conversion could buy him: freedom, patronage, protection, and a future in a city that would otherwise have kept him as property? We don't actually know for certain, and it's worth admitting that up front, because the honest answer is that both things could be true at once. What we do know is what came after. Leo Africanus did not simply survive captivity, he thrived in it. He became a celebrated figure in the intellectual circles of Renaissance Rome. He taught Arabic to Christian scholars hungry to understand the Islamic world. He worked alongside prominent humanists and mapmakers. But Leo Africanus' own story didn't end quietly in a Roman library. In 1527, Rome was violently sacked by mutinous imperial troops, plunging the city into chaos and devastation. For a foreign convert with an uncertain place in Italian society, the ground beneath him had just become far less stable. Sometime after the sack, Leo Africanus left Italy and made his way back across the Mediterranean, resettling in Tunis, and then, drawing on everything he had witnessed on his travels across North and West Africa, he began writing the book that would define his legacy. It was called simply The Description of Africa. Finished around 1526, it was an extraordinary work, part travelogue, part geography, part ethnography, covering cities, kingdoms, trade routes, and cultures that most Europeans had never even heard named. For a continent Europe knew almost nothing about beyond myth and rumor, Leo Africanus' book became the single most important source of information available. And it stayed that way, not for a decade, not for a generation, but for roughly 300 years. Long after his death, European scholars, mapmakers, and even playwrights were still drawing directly from his descriptions. Some historians believe his portrait of a sophisticated, learned African world helped shape how figures like Shakespeare imagined characters such as Othello. A single captured diplomat, in other words, ended up quietly shaping European understanding of an entire continent for centuries. And here is where his story takes its final, quietly remarkable turn. The evidence suggests that once he was back among Muslim scholars in North Africa, he reverted to Islam and returned to using his original name, al-Hasan al-Wazzan. The man who had been publicly baptized by a pope appears to have simply gone home in every sense of the word. We don't know exactly when he died. Most accounts place it somewhere around 1554 in Tunis, though even that detail carries the same uncertainty that shadows so much of his life. No grand monument marks the end. No definitive record closes the story with certainty. He seems to have simply faded from the historical stage as quietly as he had once been violently thrust onto it. So why does any of this matter more than 500 years later? Because al-Hasan al-Wazzan, Leo Africanus, Giovanni Leone, whichever name you choose, lived a life that refuses to fit neatly into any single category. Born in Muslim Spain as it was being erased, raised in Morocco as a diplomat and scholar, captured, enslaved, and converted in the heart of Catholic Europe, celebrated as one of the era's great intellectuals, and then, quietly, deliberately, choosing to return to the faith and identity he was born into. He was Andalusian and Moroccan, Muslim and, for a time, Christian, African, and European, all at once, in an era that desperately wanted to sort people into simple, opposing sides. His life was a direct rebuttal to that idea. He proved, simply by existing, that those categories were never as solid as the people enforcing them believed, and his book outlived every empire that tried to claim him. Long after the Pope who baptized him was gone, long after the pirates who captured him were forgotten, long after Rome itself had moved on to other crises, European readers were still turning to the words of a man born in Granada and raised in Fez to understand a continent his captors had never bothered to actually see for themselves. That is the real legacy of Leo Africanus. Not a single identity, but proof that a person could hold several at once, be shaped by violence and captivity, and still leave behind something no empire could erase. A body of knowledge built by a man who belonged, in the end, to no one but himself.